is Moshe coming to you from Israel and the Galilee. There's been a lot of massive news events, real events, in the last day or two that requires this type of an update because things are getting really close. We know the time clock. And I need to cover those things with you today, and they're going to concern North Korea, China, Taiwan, Japan, Russia, Ukraine, NATO, Europe, America. We're going to talk about Trump and his criminal cases, and we're going to talk about potential in Israel where the military is threatening to disobey the Department of Defense regarding Gaza. And they're claiming they have 100,000 soldiers, and this is a big thing. All right, so we're going to get into all of this today. At first, I've got to check the live stream and make sure that we are on live with sound and picture. So then I'm going to post a little bit in the chat. So please hold off on posting in the chat till I give you an all clear. Check the live stream and make sure that so please don't post in the chat until I get my posts up and tell you, okay? All right. When they come in here and insult me, I just get rid of them because they're not here to learn. They're just here to cause disruptions. Okay, so I've got that done. Feel free to do whatever you want. Post in the chat, not whatever you want. And I'm going to do some praise being a Bible-believing site. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. There is no Messiah like Yeshua. There is, where am I at? 3. There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 All right. So I'll just kind of jump in. I put a lot of this stuff up on my Telegram today. This morning, but I'm going to elaborate on it much better here. So let's get started in the Pacific, Asia-Pacific region. China, about 2 or 3 days ago, surrounded Taiwan with 30-something boats, and there were numerous aircraft flying into Taiwan, restricted airspace to insult them. And they didn't do anything other than that. Now, that could have been a drill to get their soldiers used to going over there for an attack. They've done this so many times. It could be that the Americans are ignoring it because they can't mobilize every time China does this. So after they do it 5 or 10 times, they must have done it 40 times by now. They don't react to it. So this gives China the opportunity to get, to go over there with 30 something boats. Usually it's 6 or 8 or something like that, not 30 something. To go over there with a large amount of naval vessels, surround Taiwan, and the Americans will just say, oh, another exercise, and then attack Taiwan. Remember, the flight time the distance from mainland China to Taiwan is 110 miles. For a jet not breaking the sound barrier, which is 750 miles an hour, let's say they're going at, even, 500, miles an hour, which isn't much. So that means in a half hour, they cover 250 miles. In a quarter of an hour, they cover 125 miles. So it's roughly 10, 11, 12 minutes flight time from China. Let's say 15 minutes because the base isn't on the water's edge. It's close, but it could be a mile or two. And so it's 12, 15-minute flight time. So you can launch 200-300 planes. In 15 minutes, they're bombing Taiwan and missile attacking it. At the same time, the ships are missile attacking Taiwan. Okay? The radar goes down first, then the airstrips, then the planes, and, the progression goes. Once the radar is significantly damaged, and radar has to be above ground. There's no such thing as putting radar in underground bunkers or in tunnels. It has to be exposed. So they start busting up the radar and disabling it. And then they open up corridors into Taiwan, and bombers come in and start hitting the various targets. They start taking out the armor, the tanks, armored personnel carriers, bunkers, forts, bases, command centers, anything. Supplies, storage, just bomb everything. And then they start putting several thousand troops on beachheads. They'd probably elect to use several beachheads. And they wouldn't put very many, maybe 3,000 to 5,000 on a beachhead. And they would defend these soldiers with their missile-enabled naval ships and the air support. And the soldiers would entrench in this area, and then they would bring armor in on boats to give them tanks, armored personnel carriers. They'd bring food, ammunition, equipment, radar, fencing materials, whatever they need, medical support personnel. And then when they have a solid beachhead established, which right now you might be 3-4 days into it, of course Taiwan's going to try to attack them with artillery and missiles, rockets, and bombs, and it's going to be up to the Chinese planes and naval ships to protect them from such things, which some of the attacks are going to be successful, so that's why they would open several beachheads, maybe 5 or 6. And then when they can fortify these beachhead bases, then they start landing more troops and more equipment, and they start pushing forward with artillery support, missiles, rockets, planes, naval ship launch missiles, and so forth, until they could, close in from many directions on the important cities of Taiwan. The big problem that Russia's going to have is Taiwan has for many years dug tunnels and underground bunkers, and they have a lot of F-16 aircraft that are in underground hangars. So they have like a ramp runway that goes underground. Usually they can go maybe down 100 feet or something like that. They could go down 300 feet. I do not know how deep Taiwan went. They probably went more than 100 feet. So regular bunker busted bombs aren't going to collapse the ceiling on the aircraft. They may have gone down 300 feet, in which case you're not getting there. So the runway would go down, and then there would be a turn, and then another turn, you know, or a series of turns. It would be like a parking garage, sort of, kind of, okay? And it would go down, and they would be quite safe from surprise attacks, missile attacks, and artillery, and so forth. Then the planes reverse the situation, and then when they get to the ramp, to the final ramp to get out, they go out at a reasonably fast rate of speed, and then they're on a level runway, and then they fire up and take off at high speed. So if you damage the ramp and the runway, you can deactivate the underground hangars for the planes. So I would expect they probably have more than one entrance exit, so they could go out in another area. But then all you really need to do is drop bombs on the runway, and they're disabled. But it doesn't take but hours to repair a runway. There's a crater, and you bulldoze dirt up and fill it, and then you lay down blacktop, and you got another runway again. It's usually just a matter of hours, so it's not that productive, but it could prove critical in a battle if you could freeze, 40 or 50 aircraft underground, and they can't take off for several hours. And of course, you could harass the crews attempting to repair the runways with aircraft and missiles and mortars and artillery and all kinds of stuff. So, but Iran is not having tunnels the way Hamas has tunnels. Okay? Taiwan, rather. These tunnels will be most sophisticated and secure. They can, of course, get trapped in the tunnels. Okay, so this is the kicker that you got to listen to. So yesterday, Iran says early in June we're going to take Taiwan back. Now, if you were the president of China or a top general and you were going to take Taiwan back, would you announce to the world when you're going to do it? Of course not. You destroy the element of surprise. You put yourself at a grievous disadvantage. Why in God's green earth would you ever want to do anything like that? You wouldn't. It's stupid. It's dumb. Why do it? Do you see where I'm going with this? This is not real. China is very crafty, and they play their cards close to the chest. You don't see them coming till it's too late, and they would never make an announcement like this. Now, the first question you got to ask yourself is, why would China want Taiwan that bad? Well, they make chips. Well, other people make chips too. India makes chips. You can get chips. So you want to go to war and wipe out, if America and her allies get in, you might wipe out 35-40% of your military, take damage on your homeland, all to get a chip manufacturing plant, which you may never get, because the way Taiwan talks, they'll just detonate, they'll evacuate the chip factory, the big one that everybody likes. They'll evacuate the people and blow the plant up, and then all they got to do is, put a series of, 20 or so satchel charges around the structure. And, the plant's probably 400,000 square feet, so it would be a bunch of explosives, and they could already be placed there in advance, which I imagine they are. I think it's my phone. And then all they have to do It's not my phone. Give me a second, I want to check the controls. Then all I have to do is send a radio signal. Oh, it's the noise from the outside. I think my wife's using chainsaw or drill or something. So all they do is just put a code in and send a radio signal after everybody evacuates, and then boom, the whole thing's blown up. And they probably have more security precautions than that. The detonators on the satchel charges would probably be just sitting near there. They wouldn't be activated, and they'd need to activate them. You know, they'd be pretty careful about that. But basically, in just very simple terms, that's all they need to do. On the other side of the coin is they could have, 2 or 3, 500-pound explosive charges set. The basic thing is you blow the structure up, the roof and everything caves in, and you got nothing left of the machinery, and China got a big fat zero. And they've told China they'll do that. So does China really want Taiwan that bad? I don't think so. What's it going to do for them? More people to feed. You ask yourself, what do they want it for that bad? They want it for psychological reasons, and it would be good for them to have it, but do they want to pay such a big price? So Putin, you got to listen to this important piece of the puzzle. Putin recently went to visit that XI Ching, whatever the jerk's name is, in China. And they got along and he came back. So they made some sort of a deal, probably about what to do about America. The concern is America, not Taiwan. Okay? Taiwan is a very small piece of this puzzle. It's a distraction. Now, Japan said that they will join in the fracas against China if Taiwan is at war, because they realize that China and Japan are staunch enemies for many years, and they realize they're going to be in for it badly if China ever takes over Taiwan. In addition, they know China works with North Korea closely, and they know that North Korea will attack South Korea. They've been training and setting up for that for years. South Korea has a big American military base on it. It used to have 28,000 soldiers a few years ago. I expect now it's probably up at 40, 50, even 60,000. And they've got, aircraft and tanks and armored personnel carriers, and they got helicopters and fighter jets and everything. And they're not out of the missile range of North Korea. When they built the base years ago, they were concerned that North Korea's artillery would not be able to reach it. Now, the North Koreans use a rocket-propelled artillery shell, so it can push an extra 15 miles or so out of it. So normal artillery, the big ones, goes 25 miles, and this all varies depending on what kind of a warhead you're using and how big it is, but they get 25 miles out of it. Most of the, say, Israel shooting the 155 millimeter artillery, the whole howitzer type things, they're usually setting the shells to go 16, 17 miles maximum. They don't usually use them at 25 miles. It's probably an accuracy problem. Now, Israel is frequently using these things in urban centers with civilian buildings, so the accuracy is very important. North Korea doesn't care about killing civilians, believe me. So you know, he'll take the 25-mile range and they put a rocket propelled, you know, projectile in it, the artillery shell, and it can get it out 40 miles. So they built the American base beyond the 40-mile distance from the border with North Korea so he couldn't hit the base. Today, it's not that hard to have missiles that go, you know, 60, 70 miles, even longer. They got a bunch that go over 100 miles. So North Korea could hit the base with the missiles, not the artillery. North Korea has a massive amount of artillery and artillery shells. They have a large military. Morale is not so great, and the training is not so great. The equipment is not so great. But you still have massive amount of soldiers that are ready to kill. Okay? And they have weapons. So Putin saw Chang and they talked about what they're going to do. Why was Putin worried? Well, this is it. You got to listen to this. This is really important. You're not going to get any of this junk out of mainstream media. None of this stuff. It's not junk. Ukraine has been firing long-range HIMARS type missiles into Russia, Mother Russia territory. Belgorod got attacked the other day, and Ukraine took out the Russian early defense radar warning system, which was inside Mother Russia proper territory. The UK gave Ukraine these missiles and said, as far as we're concerned, shoot them inside Russia. We don't mind. Now, NATO is now putting pressure on the other NATO countries to release restrictions on the missiles given to Ukraine, thus allowing Ukraine to attack inside Russian territory. The big blockage here is America. Other NATO countries are trying to get America to tell Ukraine, yeah, you can attack Mother Russia inside Russia. Some of the other countries in Europe, they're going to let Ukraine do it. Now, there's dissent arising in NATO. Hungary said they're not going to stay with NATO if a war breaks out with Russia. They see that they don't want to be on the wrong side of it. Now, they might not side with Russia either. They may just say, hey, we're out of NATO, we're neutral, have a good day. And Russia will have bigger fish to fry than Hungary, and they'll say, okay. And, of course, he'll come back for them down the road, but for the immediate present, he'll say, yeah, okay, you're neutral. Okay, thank you for leaving NATO, and let me know if I could help you with anything. Okay, so then what happens? NATO breaks up. So I'm getting ahead of myself. So Russia is working the snare on America with North Korea, with China, and with Iran. The idea of the snare is to provoke America, irritate it, but not get it to go into complete, crazy mode. They just want America to take their defenses away from America, put them in Asia and the Pacific, put them in the Middle East, put them in Europe, put them anywhere, but get them out of America. And that reduces the defense capabilities of America drastically. Okay? And they need to attack America to get them off their back. America's running the show. And America is putting heavy sanctions on Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia. and their economies and their currencies and stuff are suffering. Now, a very big war drum is some days ago, China sold $53 billion of T-bonds, or T-bills they call them. This wasn't China trying to rid themselves of using the dollar. They're very happy to buy things from countries like South and Central America, like food, and pay in US dollars, and they're happy to accept dollars as payment for weapons and other things. What they did was they took their dollars out of the American and out of the European banks, and they're keeping them in their own banks. So when the wars break out and the eggs hit the fan, they don't want these countries freezing their funds because of the war and confiscating them and crippling them further financially. Russia is doing this also. They're also buying gold and silver, and some of them are even buying like bitcoins and stuff like that, which is stupid because the internet will go. But they need the money out of Europe and American banks so the funds don't get seized when they go to war. So that just happened with China. All right? Russia has to make a move. Russia is screwed up with missiles landing inside Mother Russia from Ukraine. Now, there was a video recently that went around the internet in the last, I'd say, 2 days, day or two, showing a Russian S-400 anti-aircraft, anti-missile system firing 6 missiles at some incoming threat. They all missed. They all missed. So the Russian S-400 isn't very good. Russia does have the S-300, which is really much worse. The S-400 is not very effective at all. And the S-500, which is their latest version, we don't know much about, but they have very few of them, and I suspect they're not effective either. Strongly imply they wouldn't be effective. All right, so Russia's early defense radar warning system was vital to them, and Ukraine took it out. Now, they probably have it set up on other borders nearby, but they don't like it. So, Russia got to make a move now. Russia can't play games with the snare. Russia has to stop it. Russia's set up to invade Estonia. They moved these Bowie border markers that were in the water the other day, which is basically a shot across the bow saying, well, we don't respect your border anymore. Romania just expelled persona non grata, one of the Russian diplomats. Poland said they think it's great that Ukraine fires missiles into Russia. Poland said that they're considering shooting down Russian missiles entering Ukraine from inside Poland. The UK and France both have boots on the ground soldiers inside Ukraine, predominantly as advisors and helping them operate equipment and things like that. The F-16s are very shortly going to start flying out of Ukraine with Ukraine pilots attacking Russia with them. Not happened yet, but it's bound to very shortly. Russia's boxed in, and Russia has to come out fighting. Against who? One way to get out of this mess for Russia is to build a massive force and go wipe out Ukraine. Genocide. Trying to do it without genocide is not Putin's bailiwick, and it's slow, and the losses for Russia would be severe or high, and it's not a great. Putin doesn't like to do things like that. Then Ukraine can't launch missiles anymore at Russia. Of course, there is no more Ukraine. The problem is much of NATO and the European Union won't let this happen. It's a mess. Let me check the chat and we'll keep digging. Putin also very recently scheduled a visit to North Korea. He hasn't gone there yet, but I imagine it's maybe within a week or 2 weeks. Okay. Why did he go to North Korea? This is my interpretation of what I think happened. He went and met with China, and China and him got along. And then he said, well, what about North Korea hitting South Korea at the same time? And China probably spoke to North Korea, and North Korea probably wanted assurances from Putin. He wanted to talk with Putin himself. Maybe he wanted to revise the deal. I don't know. So Putin will go over there and meet with him. Putin also might be requesting soldiers from North Korea. North Korea has frequently offered him 100,000 soldiers. China also has made such offers. So if he picks up, say, 100,000 from North Korea and another 100,000 from China, which I seriously doubt would happen, but you never know. And then he put another 200,000 Russian soldiers into it and added in what he already has there. He still isn't going to conquer Ukraine. He would have to jeopardize the defense of Mother Russia severely to take down Ukraine complete. And if he does that, NATO may consider Russia severely vulnerable and go after Mother Russia. See, the snare is to aggravate the situation with North Korea and South Korea and Japan, and with China and Japan, and with China and Taiwan, and with China and the Philippines, and get America to bring more and more troops. I understand they got 350,000 soldiers in the Asia-Pacific area, but that's spread out over a very large amount of geography. Okay? They're in Guam, they might have counted Australia, they're in the Philippines, they're in Taiwan, they're in Japan, they're in many places. So if China starts a fight with Taiwan, what good does that do to China? They're going to lose military, they're going to lose equipment, all to get their hands on Taiwan, which is going to be rebellious, not want to submit, and it's going to be a headache. For what reason? No, this could be a ruse, and they're never going to attack Taiwan. They're going to attack America. Will Russia hit Romania, Poland, and Estonia? Well, Russia's another problem. You see, Taiwan's not attacking mainland China, neither is South Korea or Japan. So they don't have an imminent need to attack them. So this snare of theirs is starting to boomerang. And they got a real problem. Russia got a real problem and has to take action. Now, Russia wants to open up a land area to get to Kaliningrad. They don't want to be separated by land because they have a very big force in Kaliningrad. I'm going to take a quick break for a minute. We'll talk more about Russia. Russia got to make a move. That's the thing you got to get down. It's over for Russia if they don't. It's mandatory. Ukraine has demonstrated they can take out Russian radar. The F-16s are going to be showing up and active in Ukraine probably in a matter of weeks. So, the Ukraine missiles given by the UK and other countries are going to take out more Russian radar, although they've already done a good job. And that gives the F-16s a big advantage in terms of getting into Russia. We also found out that their S-400 anti-aircraft, anti-missile systems are not effective. But what the heck does Putin do? Putin has no way to go without China. If China isn't going to go, Putin can't. North Korea and Iran are ragtag armies. They got a bunch of crazed soldiers with rifles and, artillery weapons. They don't have an air force, and they don't have a navy. They don't have good intel. You can't go that far with them. He needs China. And China might be willing to do it at this time. Putin may tell China, when he was over there recently, he could have said, look, it's now or never. If you're not going to help me, I'm going to make a deal for peace in Ukraine. I'll grab whatever territory I can and end the war. And I'll get rid of my sanctions, and I'll start trying to build my military up. It may take a few years, and go it alone. But we're done. We're not allies anymore. And then China might have got scared because they can't survive without Putin. So they probably said, okay. As evidenced by Putin comes back and removes the buoys from Estonia, which is basically a temporary invasion to do that, and sets his military up to invade Estonia. He's got bases in Kaliningrad and Belarus, and in the part of Western Ukraine that he's occupied, plus Russia. Plus he's active in the Baltic. Plus, I doubt that Erdogan of Turkey would turn against Russia. If America said, we'll give you F-35s, he'd turn against Russia. It may come down to that. Putin threw a feeler out there for peace the other day. Now, this could have been right about the same time he was at China. He said, if I could have all the territory I occupied in Ukraine, we'll stop the war. Biden and the EU, Biden and NATO don't want that. They don't want Putin to have a victory because they're reinforcing Putin and he'll do it again. Yet they want Hamas to have a victory of a sort to reinforce Hamas, so they'll do it again. You got the difference? They're genuinely trying to save Ukraine. They're not genuinely trying to save Israel at all. They're trying to save Hamas. So Putin's choices are stop the fighting in Ukraine without a ceasefire and just say, I'm just going to keep my territory here, and if you want to continue to fighting, we'll fight. If you want to stop fighting, we'll fight. I will only, at this point, return fire. I won't initiate fire. Ukraine's not going to want that. Neither will Biden. That's not going to work. Putin could try to raise a massive force and try to make swift work out of Ukraine. But to do that, he has to take his crack troops out of Russia, use them in Ukraine where they're going to suffer casualties, equipment loss, and he's going to have to leave Mother Russia much less well defended for probably the 90 days or so it'll take to affect this, or 4 months or something like that. And he's afraid to do that. NATO in Europe is strong, okay, because they got France, they got the UK, and to a lesser extent, they got, Poland, Romania, Italy, and other countries that will fight and have weapons and they could fight. But without America, they're not really set up to take on Putin. They're not. What this axis of evil, they're all evil, but I mean the axis of evil, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, what they've been trying to do is get America to become entrenched in Middle East conflict and bring more soldiers here, maybe 250,000, as many as they could get, to leave America poorly defended. And their game plan is to not just get in their boats and sail over to America, and America's got a week or so to wait for them. Their plan is to use the sleeper agents, which the low estimate is 2 million military-age males came through the open borders. Could be high as 7 million. And the borders are still open. And you don't read anything in mainstream media about the sleeper agents anymore. All of a sudden that disappeared from the news. It shouldn't. The threat is still there, and since the border is still open, it's growing by the day. We don't know what state of organization or disorganization they're in America. But they've been there so many months, we could assume they're in a reasonably state of organization of some sort. And they've just hit the military bases, which are not very heavily defended. In other countries, you'll have military bases with, armored bunkers. You'll have many soldiers walking around armed. You'll have tanks, armored personnel carriers, all kinds of radars, watchtowers, not fences that look like schoolyard fences, very serious fences that are very difficult to get through. You have to blow them up, stuff like this. In America, you don't have that. You got basically what looks like a schoolyard fence, or 2 or 3 layers of that, which you could just take a garbage truck and mow them down. Boom, 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 like dominoes. They fall. It's nothing. You got entrances to the bases. Big bases might have, 3 or 4 entrances. They might have 2, depends. And you're going to have 8 or 9 military police or so, or maybe 20 at the place checking invoices and bills of lading for trucks going in and out, checking IDs on people going in and out, and talking to visitors, and giving them parking permits and telling them where to park and where to go, and this kind of thing, right? They're busy, they're occupied with, entrance and egress, people going in and out. And there's not that many of them. They're typically going to have 9mm Berettas. They might have some AR-15, some M16 type guns. But they're not going to have 50 caliber squad machine guns. They're not going to have shoulder-fired rockets. They're not going to have tanks set up by the base. A well-protected base, they'd have, 2 or 3 tanks by the entrance, and the fences would be solid fortified fences that you can't really climb over, and you're not really going to be easily pushing them over. And the tanks would be sitting there. Tanks are not so easy to take out. They shoot artillery. Some shoot mortars. It's not unusual for them to lay smoke out. They usually have two machine guns. At least one, if not both, can be operated while the shooter is closed inside the tank. It changes the perspective on things, greatly. And in America, the soldiers are not allowed to carry personal firearms on the base. The only people running around protecting the base are the Department of Defense police and the military police. And then you'll have the intelligence agencies of the military, like the Army has military intelligence, the Navy has NIS, Naval Investigative Service. And then you'll have their police departments that are more like detectives. CID, I think, is what the Army calls it, Criminal Investigation Division of the MPs. They walk around armed with pistols. They don't schlep rifles around. They might have a few rifles in their office, but they're basically pistols. They have a limited amount of resistance, very limited. The same with there's an NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and then there's Navy Intelligence, which I think is NIS, or I can't remember. Then you have Air Force Intelligence. And these people are titled special agents and criminal investigators, and they carry weapons 24 hours a day. The Coast Guard has Coast Guard Intelligence. Marines, I don't think they have Marines Intelligence. Never heard of one. But there's not that many of them on the base. They're, typically there for counterintelligence. They're there to run background investigations, surveillance, There's not that many of them. Maybe a base with 40, 50,000. Adding up all the intelligence operatives and the criminal investigators, you may get 20 people, 25, it's no resistance for these sleeper agents. They'll come well armed, and they'll just make sure that the soldiers don't get to the arsenals, and they'll just go on a massive killing campaign, and you're going to see all the garbage of October 7th, because you reap what you sow. And America and Netanyahu had a very unhealthy set of circumstances in this event, okay? And these sleeper agents will interrogate the soldiers immediately with, pointing guns at them, and they're going to say, tell me how to get to the arsenal, where the weapons stored, where's this, where's that. And they have so many of the soldiers to go through. As soon as the soldier says, my name and rank and serial number, they're going to blow his head off in front of the others. So it's not going to take long, and they're going to talk. They'll separate them from each other. And then these guys are going to more than likely start raping the female soldiers, the women employees on the base. They rape men. They'll start raping men. They'll start beating them, and, it's burning them alive and all kinds of stuff. It's bad. Warsaw just found a network of incendiary bombs, that's in Poland, that Russia placed there, that were for a future date for controlled demolition. So they're not to knock a building down. These were incendiary bombs to create fires. So they were put there by, I guess, Russian intelligence agents, and when the time came, Russia could probably send a radio signal, and these things would blow up, causing tremendous fires in Warsaw. But Warsaw picked up on it and got the devices and deactivated them. They appear to be, the whole thing appears to come from Russia. So Putin's running into troubles, okay? What you'll see with the sleeper agents and the military bases is exactly going to look like Israel on October 7th. You're going to see it just like that. People live on these bases. They have on-base housing. Families live there. They're going to get children, everything else. It would be horrific. Horrific. And it's going to go down. And then, after that happens, China and Russia, maybe North Korea and Iran are going to, and other countries are going to load up ships and go invade the country to loot, plunder, pillage, and steal. Are they going to have resistance from the many millions of survivalists and preppers and stuff? Yeah, I think so. It says in the Bible, in Jeremiah 50 and 51, those chapters, that they're going to be afraid to fight. They won't come out of their hole. So the force could be so scary, they're afraid to do anything. The Chinese soldiers, North Korean soldiers, and Iranian soldiers would be fairly ruthless and do anything. The Russian soldiers will be ruthless, but they're not as sick and deviant as the others are. Now comes the kicker. There's a movie circulating around, a video, and who started circulating this video? Netanyahu, the offspring of Netanyahu, who claims to be a son. He's a child of Netanyahu. Some of you know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, he, this Nair character, released a video. Now, I watched the video. It's in Hebrew. You're not going to understand the Hebrew, but this is basically the gist of the video. It was a guy dressed up in combat gear, an Israeli soldier, a reservist. And the video is very forceful, but it's just from one person. Now, he had much of his face covered. You could just see his eyes. Now, I don't know if they can get eye recognition, facial recognition just from the eyes. I suspect that if that was the case, he would have put heavy sunglasses on, and he didn't. So what did he say? He said, we are 100,000 reservists. That's who he says he's representing. Now, we are not going to listen to the Secretary of Defense, Gallant, who's an idiot, and this other character, high-ranking in the government, I forgot which one. He said, we only listen to Netanyahu. And I said, oh my gosh, what a mistake. Now remember, who's the one that started releasing this video but Netanyahu's son, who's, I believe, in America now, so he doesn't have to fight in the war. How about that? I do not believe that this Nair Netanyahu ever went down to Gaza or Lebanon. I don't believe he's been here. Okay? So the soldiers said, we're not putting up. If you tell us that we have to leave Gaza and put it in the hands of the Palestinian Authority or Hamas, we will not listen to you. We will not leave Gaza. We are 100,000. We will invite all the citizens, all the Jews of Israel to come to Gaza under our protection. Now, I'm trying to figure out what the heck that means. The word come is bold. I mean, it's a pretty easy word to understand. Is he meaning come to Gaza and settle there? Yeah, but it's a hostile, crazy place right now. You can't live there. Is he saying we're going to do what's called a genocide there and then you can come live here? Probably. You know, they come back and they find, Nazi literature in the houses in Gaza with the so-called innocent civilians. They say practically every home or apartment in Gaza has hidden weapons. These are not innocent people, okay? The civilians joined with Hamas on October 7th. So, for asking the Israelis to come down there, they're going to get rid of all these people, which is quite biblical. It is. And we're in the year of recompenses. So they said they would listen to Netanyahu because they're duped in by Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's broadcasting, we're going to have a victory, we're not going to leave there, and all this stuff. Yet, where's the victory? And he reduces the military action there to shut Biden up, and that causes more casualties in our soldiers. So our soldiers are disgruntled. A lot of high-ranking officers like colonels and majors, those kind of people, were saying that they're very, they're ready to not listen to the heads of the army and the military. Now, let's say Israel is activated right now with reserves and regular personnel, let's say 500,000 people. Could 20% of them be ready to rebel against the idiot leaders of this country? Well, I don't know why it took so long. If 20%, 100,000 do rise up against them, you're probably going to get another 100,000 right behind them. Because when they see the movement moving, they're going to go for it. Is one side of this thing in the Israeli military going to fight against the other side? Chances of that are just about zero. Unless God sets something up, I don't ever see that happening. Will the police fight against these soldiers? First of all, they can't. They don't have equipment like that. Second of all, some of the police would try to arrest them because they're so used to arresting other people that are not police. They might try it, but they can't hold up. Look, they have tanks, armored personnel carriers, artillery, mortars, machine guns, shoulder-fired rockets, intel equipment, communications equipment, rations, explosives of various kinds. What are the police with their pistols and assault weapons going to do? They don't. I mean, they might have a handful of armored SUVs for their executives, but they're basically running around in, small police cars that, you could just shoot through them with a pistol, let alone a rifle. They can't hold up. What are they going to do? We know the government of Israel is gone in Zechariah 12. There is no government of Israel. There is no idea. We know Ezekiel 34 and other places talks about the destruction of the shepherds of Israel, the bad shepherds, which hasn't happened yet. And the shepherds is the government. The government provides the healthcare system. It takes care of the water, the gas, the electricity, the protection of the country. It imposes a religion called Talmudic, they call it Judaism. It's Talmudic Judaism. It's not real Judaism. and all this other stuff, you know. So they are shepherds. They provide a welfare system for the people and so forth. And the rabbis, the rabbis are shepherds too, but there's not that many of them. And the Messianic congregation leaders are shepherds. The Messianic congregation up by the border by Lebanon got blown up yesterday from the Hezbollah, but nobody was in the building. The building took damage, but that was about it. And it didn't make it in the news. It said Messianic congregation. Is this real or just a video? I don't know. Yet. They're saying, the Muslims are saying it's very real, and they're saying that Netanyahu did this. Yeah, look, if Netanyahu did it, and he's behind it, because he wants the soldiers to be loyal to him, not Gallant, the Minister of Defense, he wouldn't have the video be introduced by his son, who's evading the draft outside of Israel, evading going into the military and fighting in Gaza or Lebanon. So it doesn't make sense to me that this is something that Netanyahu did. I think that they just did it on their own, and they believe, sadly, that Netanyahu meant what comes out of his mouth regarding we're going to have a total victory if we're not stopping. Well, you can't believe anything Netanyahu tells you, ever. You can't. You just can't. He's such a bad liar, such a profound liar, just constantly lying. You can't do it. It's just, you've got to be an idiot to believe that guy. I mean, other politicians talk like that to the media openly, that you can't believe anything Netanyahu says. I've read it many times in the paper. It's common knowledge. Biden learned his lesson with that. Obama learned his lesson with that guy. Trump got along with him. Curiously, Netanyahu has 3 criminal cases over his head. And now we got Trump. Now we need to talk about Trump, because we do see in the Jeremiah 50:51 prophecies against the daughter of Babylon, America, it says ruler against ruler. Okay? Could Trump, as a former president, constitute a ruler? Not really, but you see, we know this is going to happen. A ruler against ruler is somebody with a power base, an official power base, inside the United States, is going to go against another power base, which we assume is the Fed. Now, Trump holds a position as a former president, but it brings no authority with it. But okay, here's what's going on. There's 34 cases of crimes in the New York City court system. The New York City District Attorney is prosecuting them. And the final day for the trial is either tomorrow, Monday, or Tuesday. But they're thinking the jury is going to go into deliberation, or thinking about how to vote, starting Tuesday. That's what I read. They think that's the progress. So closing arguments and all that stuff would probably be done Monday or maybe Tuesday morning, I don't know. And then the lawyers leave, the witnesses leave, Trump leaves, the district attorney leaves and the judge hangs around because they might ask the judge questions, the jury, and he might have to do things with the jury. So this go like a juror could get sick and they got to put an alternate in. Okay, somebody could get appendicitis, or somebody could, fall down and crack their head open, or jump out a window, or who knows what. But the judge is going to be reachable. He might go to the golf course with his cell phone, but he'll be reachable. How many days will the jury deliberate on this? We don't know. They could be gone a day and come back and say guilty or not guilty, or maybe 3 hours. I don't have any idea. It may go on for a week. I don't think it's going to go longer than that, but it could, because they have 34 counts. So they have to come back with a decision for each of the 34 counts, guilty or not guilty. That's pretty complicated. I would say at least a week, I'm guessing. Unless they decide that, the whole thing is bogus and Trump should be let free, then that could take 2 or 3 hours or less. Or they may come back and say Trump's guilty of everything, which I highly doubt they would ever do, but they could. And they don't think very much about it. Then what would happen is they say that they've reached a decision. The judge calls them back into court. They go to the jury room. The prosecuting attorney and the defense attorneys are called in, and the witness who's receiving whatever it is they're dishing out. If Trump gets found guilty, what happens? Well, let me interject this for you. Yesterday, Biden announced that he's going to do a nationwide press conference, an address to the nation, the day after Trump's trial is concluded. In other words, the jury tells the judge what happened. If Trump's found not guilty on all counts, then the judge just says thank you to the jury, you're dismissed, and they go back to the jury room and they're given instructions about how they're going to get their paycheck and how to go home and see you around the campus, thank you for the service, and then they go home. And then the judge tells the defendant, you're free to leave, dismissed, all charges. And then everybody just goes home. The judge goes back to the golf course, and it's over. Now, if he's found guilty of any of the 34 charges, the jury is dismissed, and nobody really goes home from the prosecutor and the defense side. The judge has to take into advisement. In other words, he's going to go think about what he's going to do for sentencing. He could give Trump a suspended sentence. He could give Trump a fine. He could give Trump probation. He could give Trump a jail sentence and a fine and probation or parole, whatever they want to call it. So, he's going to go what's called taking into advisement, which is usually a day or two. Or it might be a week or something. So he might tell Trump, well, I want you to post bail, for the sentencing hearing for that period of time, which Trump already has bail, so that's probably not much of a problem. They'll just keep the bail, and usually they let a guy like Trump um, stay out on bail pending the sentencing hearing. And then he will probably wait for the sentencing hearing and then continue with bail pending an appeal. Now, I don't know what the New York City judge is going to do. The prosecutor is going to argue that Trump is a flight risk. He's rich, has an aircraft, lives in houses around the world, and he could flee. The judge could say a former president fleeing. No, I don't think so. The judge also has to look at what kind of potential for reversal and appeal is there. This judge is most likely against Trump and probably doesn't want to see him campaign anymore. So he could try no bail. Then Trump's got to go to incarceration. Okay? And the plan there is when his sentence comes down, if it involves any, incarceration, he would get time served and he stays in jail. He doesn't go out and go back in. They just shift prisons around on him. And this is a pain in the neck for the Secret Service, and I don't know how they're going to do that. Probably Biden would get them off the case and just leave them in the good, competent hands of the prison authority. Remember Epstein? And that happened in New York City too, didn't it? And that's it for Trump. And, they could put him in general population, although I don't know if they would be that bad about it. It's, but, we don't know. Why would Biden schedule a nationwide press conference the day after the Trump trial unless he knew Trump was going to lose? Let's play it the other way. Let's say he thinks Trump wins. Okay, he already scheduled the conference on nationwide TV. So let's say Trump wins. What could he do? Well, he could just quietly say, we had emergencies, I can't do this conference right now, and forget about it and let it blow over. Yeah, you could do that. But I don't think he would announce it now. Number one, we don't know the date that the jury is going to finish deliberating. It could be 2 weeks, So what's Trump? Biden gets in and says, well, Trump beat the cases. This is the American justice system at work. He was proved innocent of all charges, and I welcomed the debates with him and made a better man win the election. You think Biden's going to say that? No. He's doing this. He's going to get out there and say, look, Trump's a criminal. He's a dangerous man. He doesn't deserve to be president. Now he's a convicted felon on 11 counts or 18 counts or 6 counts. He's facing, 12 years in jail. He's not going to run for president. And I'm the best guy, and I love you, Americans. And that's what it's going to be. Now, let's talk about Trump. This is important. Trump is the best contender right now to be the leader of a civil war, ruler against ruler in America. It looked like Abbott, the governor of Texas, was a contender, but he just sank down. Biden left him alone, let him close his Texas borders and run aliens out and stuff like that and left them alone, and he's leaving Biden alone. DeSantis in Florida is not stepping forward. Nobody is. Trump is not gonna like, people say, oh, Epstein never died in jail, they faked his death, and they do this all the time with celebrities, Michael Jackson, Elvis, and all that stuff. Who knows? Who knows? I don't know what they do one way or the other, so I can't tell you if one way or the other. But if, let's say, this thing was a sham, he's going to have to fake it. Well, that means he's got to go live undercover somewhere, no more Mar-a-Lago, go live in some deserted, buy a piece of land with 8 or 9,000 acres and live in the middle of it, surrounded by, 20 or so security guys on every single shift. And he just has to stay there and people can't see him and that kind of thing. He's too old for extensive plastic surgery. That wouldn't work. I mean, it could, but it'd be hard with a character like that. So, he doesn't want this. Trump is not wanting it. He's talking about Biden stealing the election repeatedly. He could I've heard him say to the people, January's a long time off, January 20th when they swear the president, telling him he didn't think we had enough time with Biden running around. He may start painting a picture to the people in America, the survivalists, the militias, the preppers, and these kind of people, many of which go to the churchianity churches, to start saying, look, we're all cooked. Biden is completely taking the country over. He's completely incompetent. He's an nincompoop. He's an idiot. Obama's running him. And, this is the things Trump might say. And you better stand up for your country and yourself right now, or you're going to be a goner, and then get the people to stand up against the government. And it's called the Civil War. There needs to be a leader, and Trump's an excellent leader as far as Satan bot people go. For Satan bots, he's a good one. So that might be where we get ruler fighting ruler from. You're not my president. Now, here's another tidbit that's choice that I imagine Biden pulled off. This one will shock you. See, I'm telling you, there's so much happening. It's amazing, okay? A federal court just said, and I will tell you from my knowledge of things that they were correct in their decision, by the way, that felons can own firearms. That's a federal court. Now, where does this come from? When you study the founding fathers of America, people went to jail all the way back, when Mel Gibson made that revolutionary movie against Great Britain. I'm kidding. They went back all the way there to 1700s. They had jails and people got caught for, stealing animals, robbing things, and, murder and rape and burglary and, fraud, embezzlement, blackmail, all this stuff went on, right? Armed robbery and whatnot. They went to prison. The prisons were not very great, fun places. They didn't have the setup like, you saw on TV, like a Gunsmoke or something, where the sheriff has a little building and he sits at a desk and he looks at wanted posters and drinks coffee and has a bottle of whiskey in his drawer, and there's 2 or 3 jail cells right there, and they got people in the jails. Every time you see the jail cell, you don't see a toilet in the jail cell, so what the heck did they do? You know, they never show you a guy wearing prison clothes, so he's wearing the same clothes month after month without a bath. There's no sink in the room. I mean, these are very inaccurate depictions of what the reality must have been. Um, and you know, you look at these things, they got a town of, 40, 50,000, and they got 3 or 4 jail cells. Well, that doesn't make sense. One good Saturday night drunken brawl, you're all full. So they don't depict it correctly. They probably had a building that had, bathing facility, had toilets or outhouses, and it was a high security building. It probably had fences around it, and they had guards watching it, and it probably had, a small town, 10 or 12 cells, a big place, 30 or 40, something like that, all this with the getting down in the street and doing gunfights, quick draw against each other. There was only one instance of this ever happening. I think it was Wild Bill Hickok and another guy actually did it, leaving that one incident out, and it was at a great distance. I think it was approaching 75 feet. The Hickok guy, I think it was Hickok 1. But it never happened. There's no reports of it ever happening. They had newspapers back then, and there's nothing in there. It just never happened. Hollywood manufactured this to get it on TV and make it look good. And they had all these things, you had Paladin, you had Wanted Dead or Alive with Steve McQueen with a sawed-off lever-action shotgun, a rifle that he called a hog's leg. You had Matt Dillon, Marshall Dillon, and then you had Bonanza. You had all of these TV shows all depicting gunfights where they drew down on each other. That's not how the West worked. They did have gambling halls. They did have big elaborate saloons. They did have hotels upstairs, hotel rooms. They did have dining rooms where the food was usually pretty good, like the Las Vegas casino. They had prostitution in there. They had showgirls doing dancing shows. They had vaudeville comedians. They had all kinds of stuff going on in these big, casino places in the larger cities, like San Francisco would be one, Kansas City, cities in Texas. They had a lot of big cities. Well, they could have had 100 or over 100,000 people back then easily. And they had a lot of visitors. Trains were coming in. They were buying and selling cattle all the time. They had, manufacturing in these places. It was pretty good commerce going on. Some of the cities had shipping when they were on the water or on the rivers, like the Mississippi. And they had these cities were built up, pretty big. But you didn't have gunfights. You got to imagine that, okay? They were in these casino places, and they would get drunk. And you got to remember, at that time in America, you were freely able to buy heroin, opium, marijuana, and all kinds of narcotics. It was just, and people did get hooked on opium, Dilaudid was one. It was a liquid, and it had opium in it. It didn't have Demerol, or it had real opium. And people would buy pint and quart bottles of it, or whatever, and they would carry it around and drink it. You had people that had diseases. The doctors were pretty, not very elaborate back then. They didn't want surgery. They didn't have a surgery for it. They didn't have medicine for it. People were in pain from things. And they walked around and they drank their Dilaudid, Let's say a wheel from a wagon fell on a guy and he broke his leg. Well, he's laying there, he's in pain, waiting for his leg to heal. So they give him some bottles of this opioid, Dilaudid, and he drinks it. And voila, the pain goes down, probably 80, 90%. And then he's laid in bed for a month or 6 weeks till he could get around and walk again, and now he's hooked on Dilaudid. Or he's not hooked on Dilaudid, and every time it rains or it gets cold, his leg starts acting up, and he goes, So people had all these narcotics too. So they did have gambling in there, and the gambling was fixed and rigged for sure. Wyatt Earp used to partake, I think it was him or was it Hickok, one of them, used to run faro games inside a casino, and they were cheating the people, come on. And they had fights in the casino, but they didn't draw down on each other, they bushwhacked each other. One guy thought he was cheating or something like that, he would just draw his gun out and shoot him across the table. And a lot of them had Bowie knives. They used to wear the Bowie knife behind the neck, and they'd reach in and, smack the guy with the Bowie knife. They wouldn't throw it at him. They'd smack him or stab him. And they made laws back then against Bowie knives being illegal because they were so deadly. Guns you could have, but not the Bowie knife. And they had little derringers they carried. And they were, they did. They'd be drunk and one would cheat another or insult another or something like that, and he would just shoot him in the back or something like that. And then the cops or the sheriff or the marshal, whoever was there, would arrest the guy, put him in jail. Then they'd have a trial, and if there were witnesses that said, he said this, that, and then he just shot him in the butt, then they hang him. And he'd say as a defense he was drunk, and they say that's, So these things were pretty bad, the lifestyle was pretty intense. Anyway, we're going to be very interested in seeing what happens to Trump, which could be before the end of this week, but probably into next week or the week after. And then there's a lot of issues. Will Trump get bail until his appellate hearing is heard? But after his appellate hearing is heard, the first, I think, now I don't know New York law, but I think the procedure is Trump's not a regular person, and he's a presidential candidate for the Republican Party. So I think Trump could go right to the Supreme Court and ask the Supreme Court to intervene. Well, he would give what would Trump's best bet? See, Trump's best bet here, and that's what the other side's going to try to make sure it doesn't happen, is that he could put off his appeals until after November election. That's almost a half a year. I don't think that could work. It might. And you see, if you take it like a regular person, not Trump, not a former president, he can go to the state Supreme Court. Well, the process would normally be in most states a appellate court in New York State that would appeal the decision of the New York City court. The appellate court, I don't know what they would. Normally, the amount of appeals that get approved would be way under 1%. So out of every 500 appeals, one gets passed. Usually, it's because some process was overlooked in the trial, or witnesses were bandied or bothered, or something went wrong. Something broke the procedure in the law, and they fix it. But this is weird because it's a former president and an active candidate for the office. So it would go to the New York State's court, and if they turned it down, I guess his next stop would be after the state appellate court, the state Supreme Court. And they would probably rule rather rapidly that they don't see any merits why this case should be heard in the state Supreme Court. And then he goes, I would think he goes to federal appeals court, and they very well might do a reversal or order a new trial or something like that. And then he, being a former president, I'm quite sure, could go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court may also decide they don't want to rule on it. So that could happen too. Or maybe Trump could go right to the Supreme Court and have the case quashed. Or maybe Trump could go there and say he wants the appellate process delayed until after the election, and the Supreme Court may be on his side and help him with that. I think he's already trying to get immunity, but this stuff that he did here is not stuff that would be most likely for immunity. It was something about cooking his books from his corporations and personal wealth. It wasn't like taking classified documents to the house. So I don't know what's going to happen, okay? But it certainly has potential. Somebody, to have a ruler fighting ruler, you need a ruler. Well, Biden's a ruler. We got the ruler there. What about, on the other hand, who's the ruler? We don't have a ruler. Who are the candidates? Well, Abbott doesn't seem likely interested. Neither does DeSantis. And that brings us to Trump. So everything is so crazy right now, and there's so much going on. I don't really know where to begin, but I do know it's going to lead to a siege on Israel in Zech.12, where they're going to surround Judah and Jerusalem, and they're going to scare the bejeebies out of the Israelites that are left, the poor, the downtrodden, and so forth. And the Zech.34, the rich fat cats, the big cattle, that push the little ones around, they're going to be gone. Okay, back to Biden and what he did to get more votes. This is shocking. So the federal court said that felons could have guns. And that's it. So now the felons, the states can't say, well, let's play this. The states will say, you see, some states, like take California, a gun dealer has to have a California state firearms license to sell firearms and a federal one. So the state license says, the state of California says, well, a convicted felon in California cannot own a gun. Well, the federal court says they can. So until the federal court tells the gun stores that they could sell guns to people that were felons, they can't. The gun dealer could lose his license. In California, may not abide by it. I don't know what's going to happen. So then there would be court cases, and California would lose. Other states may just comply. I don't know. They're going to look to the ATF, and they're going to say, what do I do? What do I do? Well, the whole criminal background investigative check has now just gone out the window. the illegal aliens are not going to be the only ones to not go through a criminal background investigation because it's not relevant to buying a gun. In the old days, the guy needed a gun, he got out of jail, he got out of Wyatt Earp's jail, and he had to go, he had a ranch, he had to slaughter hogs, he had to shoot wolves trying to eat his livestock. He had to defend himself against pirates that came up, or bandits that came from Mexico. There were Indian uprising problems with them fighting against the Indians, traveling. There were highwaymen that were holding up people traveling in remote roads. So yeah, you'd be, sending somebody to their death without a gun, like sending somebody to New York City without a gun. But they do it because the people are dumb and they put up with it. So this is making it easier for the illegal aliens to get guns because the criminal records check is going to be worthless. They can't specify certain types of felonies mean you can't have a gun. Okay? A murderer in the Old West, when he got out of jail, would be able to have a gun. There was no you can't have a gun. It was absurd. So they take the founding fathers' viewpoint and apply it today. That's what the court did. Then it was obvious in the history books and the law books that people that got convicted of crimes had guns. Now, were they able to vote back then? I don't know, but I think they were. I'm not sure. But the way Biden is playing this game is the states can decide who they want to vote or not. So they're going to vote, they're going to say the felons can vote. What do you think they're going to say? Because the felons are going to gravitate not to Trump, but to Biden. He gave them their gun rights back, for crying out loud, Are they going to be able to get concealed carry weapons permits? I don't think the federal court dealt with that. Many states you can carry concealed without a permit. Some states you can't. Some states you can carry exposed without a permit. Other states, even if you have a permit, they don't want you carrying it exposed. Cops are so funny and so stupid. I remember years ago in Florida, in the 60s, anybody could put a gun on exposed and walk around with it. Now, if you went downtown, this was in Tallahassee, where I went to school for a few years. If you went downtown and you were walking around the state capitol, I imagine the police would stop you and ask you why you're parading around downtown wearing a gun. But if you were away from the downtown metropolis of, where the governor's mansion was and the capitol and all that, I don't think anybody would have bothered you. I never did it, but I don't think they would bother you. Now, you're able to keep guns in your car. Okay, so then you fast forward to the late 80s, and Florida started making mandatory concealed carry weapons permits. In other words, you filled the paperwork out. I think you had to give them some evidence of some sort of gun training, like hunter training safety course, or it was very easy. And you got, they did a criminal records check on you, and you got a carry concealed weapons permit pretty easily. And the weapons permit was not tied to any weapon. And in some states, like New York, they give you the weapon and then they specify on the permit what weapons it's covered by. But in Florida, any weapon you had on your person would be covered by it. There was no serial numbers written on there or anything. Okay. And then you didn't have to go through the criminal records check as long as your permit was valid. You just showed the store your permit, they wrote it down, they didn't phone it in or anything like that. So you cash and carried the gun. You gave me a credit card and then you took the gun home. Then, so it used to be you could carry exposed without a permit. Now, and the cops took great pleasure in having a permit. Now, in the hot weather down there, and I knew cops, some of them would actually carry their, the detectives and the high-ranking officials would actually carry their, what was it? A short barrel revolver back then, like a cult agent, the detective special, the police special from Smith and Wesson, or the 38 special. And they wouldn't have the sport jacket on, and they'd walk around the street, and they usually had the handcuffs hanging out, so you'd know they were a cop, right? And I knew guys that worked for Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and there was two of them I knew there. One was a lieutenant in the New York City Police Department, and he was a really good guy. I was studying criminology then, and I got pretty friendly with him. He was a really nice guy. He liked me because I was from near where he was working in New York City. And he retired. He did 20, 30 years, and he moved down to Florida. And I don't know why he went into redneck country like that, but he did, and he got a job as, I think he was director of it, and it was basically a crime lab. But they, I think, had law enforcement powers. He had a badge. I think they had law enforcement powers. But they didn't even wear their guns. They didn't even, it was nothing. It was so safe around there. They didn't wear guns. There was another guy named Smitty. I think he was also a lieutenant, and he ran the gun lab there, ballistics identification and other things. So he worked in the lab in New York City Police, and he kidded around with me too. He knew where I lived. And so I knew the two of them there. I don't think either one of them ever walked around with a gun. So then go fast forward into the 90s, and then what happened is the people were running around with concealed weapons in Florida because these permits were being given out like candy. As long as you didn't have a criminal record and you could show some sort of firearms training, of any sort, they gave it to you, and everybody's running around carrying concealed weapons, and the crime rate's going down. Why? They see an old lady at 10:30 at night going from a public supermarket to her car, and a car is 400 or 500 feet away from there because it's crowded, or it's a Walmart, or you name your pick. It's a Winn-Dixie, whatever, and it's dark, and there's lights in the parking lot. People are coming and going, and it's cold weather at night, and somebody runs up on her and gives her a smack upside the head, and or pushes her and, holds her purse, shoves her, and runs away, whatever, right? Okay, well, all that kind of stuff stopped because a little old lady walking around with a hand in her pocket got a little revolver or a pistol there, and the guy starts bothering her, and she's going to pop a bullet in him, or try to. Yet the felon, Freddie the felon, can't have a gun to shoot back because his lifestyle is bad. If he gets caught committing a crime as a felon carrying a firearm, they had sentencing guidelines that, instead of, for the strong arm robbery getting, like 2 or 3 years in jail, he'd wind up with 15 years or something like that. So he couldn't run around with guns. So things got safer. Home burglaries with the people home went away, carjacking went away, a lot of things dropped. Things got safe. And then what happened? So the cops used to take pleasure in carrying their guns concealed, which you couldn't do, but you could wear it openly. Now the permits came, so you'd see the cops walk into a a Wendy's or a Burger King for lunch, the detectives, and they'd take the sport jacket off and they'd have the gun on, exposed. And I saw this many times, walking around with the gun exposed, became the new in thing for the cops. So what does this tell you? The rotten, stinking cops in the modern days, all they care about is their own selves. And they care. I was a cop when I was younger, many years ago. It wasn't anything like this. We didn't have bulletproof vests. We had revolvers, and we were worried about people. Okay, we tried to help people. Okay, we weren't there trying to make people crazy and belittle them and sound them down. Even if people opened up a mouth to you, you still were worried about them, you know. I remember we caught a guy once at a traffic light and he fell asleep at the wheel with the motor running and his foot just happened to be on the brake and he was sleeping. Well, you know, what do you do with a guy like that? He's going to kill himself more likely than anybody else. So, you know, you try to be nice to him. You look at him as a victim of his own alcoholism. He's an idiot, but you try to be nice to him. You don't start, you know, hey, you moron, and drag him out of the car by his shirt and throw him on the ground. That's the kind of thing they'll do today. You know, we didn't have pepper spray. We had mace, which was not that effective. You'd spray it here on the chest, and the vapor would come up. But I sprayed myself with mace maybe 8 or 10 times, you know, to see what it would do, and it was crap. You know, what it was good for is if there was a riot or a demonstration and you started spraying it like crazy on people, giving them, you know, it would waft off and it would irritate your sinuses, your mucous membranes in your mouth, your nose, and your eyes, and it would make you want to go wash your face or get out of there. That's what it was, junk. It was never very effective. You know, one of the guys I used to ride with used to use it to shoot mosquitoes in the car. And we were in the car with the air conditioning on, and it didn't do much. We put the windows down, but it wasn't that, you know. You know, it's government issued mace. You didn't have to buy it, but it was junk. So we didn't have bulletproof vests, so we were pretty, you know, careful, you know. Anyway, I remember when they first came out with bulletproof vests. Second Chance was the big company, okay? And you know what used to happen when they gave this is unbelievable, I'm telling you it's true. This is going into the 80s, I think. Very late 70s. No, I think we're actually in the late 80s or the mid 80s. Departments were buying these vests and they were giving them to guys. They initially were, I think, level 2. They would, you know, they would stop most pistols, you know. Even a 44 Magnum, I think, that was the standard. And every time they issued them to the department, this happened. In all the departments, the guy would go home and he would be playing with his vest. And he would go to the kitchen and he would take a kitchen knife and he'd go like this to see if it stopped it. Now, bulletproof vests don't stop a knife. They got knife vests that they sell to corrections officers in the jail that stop knives, and they have also special kind that'll stop a knife and a bullet, but it's pretty heavy and expensive, and probably nobody buys them. They're very rare. You haven't seen anything like that. They did, I don't even know if they still make them. At one time somebody made them and it probably went away. And then they have, for people that work on the water, like Coast Guard, you know, and police that work on the water, they have bulletproof vests that are combined with flotation. So it's like a life preserver, but those are bulky and stuff, but they do effectively work as a life preserver and as a bulletproof vest. Guys would stab themselves. Out of every department, you'd have 2 or 3 idiots that would stab themselves. The first few days they handed out the bulletproof vests. They're stupid. They never used to be this way. You know? I remember in the 80s, I was in San Francisco living there, and I was at a guy's house, and I walked out of his house, and he had a house right at near the corner of Haight and Ashbury, which was the big hippie capital around 1967, 68, 69, maybe into 1970 at the latest or so, 71 maybe. And so he had a lot of weird people walking around by his house, and he liked that. He was into it. The guy's dead now. So I was leaving his house or coming back in or something, and across the street, I saw a guy urinating against a garbage dumpster. And this was a big street. It was like, I think, 2 lanes each direction plus parking. So it was a pretty broad street. So I walked a little bit closer to see what was going on because like 3 or 4 cops came up on this guy. Well, they had this female cop. She couldn't have been more than 5 foot, maybe 5'2" at the most. And she ran up on this guy, which was a big, maybe 10 inches taller than her. And she's bullying him and, hard with the mouth. I mean, it's sitting there, what are they doing with this police, What is the point of this? The guy just turns around and punches her. And she'll be in the hospital for, weeks getting her jaw and her cheekbones fixed and everything. I mean, you can't do these things like this. And what happens is it motivates the small female officer to shoot people. I mean, it's crazy. Then they took the nightsticks away from these people that used to really work. Okay, you don't hit people with them like that. You hold them and you go and you ram them in the gut or something like that with it. Boom. And you could block with that, and you could do a lot of good things with that. And then we also had blackjacks. I loved my blackjack. It had a spring in it with a lead weight, and you can pull it out of the pocket. Uniforms came with blackjack pockets. I used to practice because I was into martial arts, and I'd be able to get it out. I can't do it in the chair, but I would draw it. It has a loop on it, and one swoop across the side of the head. And I had it very down to a very smooth action. And when you hit somebody with that, which I fortunately never did, they went down like lightning struck them. They went right down. These collapsible batons are crap. They use them today to break windows. That's all they're good for. They're garbage. So the cops don't have a way of defending themselves non-lethally. They got pepper spray, which is reasonably good. And they got the taser, which they abuse, and that's not so good. But a lot of them don't really use tasers that much. But the nightstick required a big man to use it, and they used to give you, training on it, and you get effective. I mean, if you had 8 hours with it, you'd know what you were doing. It's not difficult. A 1-day course, you got it pretty much. Now, some places that were really big on it, like LA, Sheriff, I think they used to train them on the stick for about a week. They knew pretty good. They were pretty good with those sticks. New York City cops, too, very good with the sticks. So, so what did? They were forcing the cops to shoot. They took the good weapons away. They can't use blackjacks anymore, because you can put people in comas and bad stuff, So they took the weapons like the nightstick away, the blackjack away, and it forces them to shoot. And then they start hiring people that are physically small and weak and can't handle, like there's a big fight in a bar by a pool table, and, you're the beat patrolman, and there's somebody saying, hey, there's a fight in O'Reilly's pool hall, and you run in there and you got to stop the fight. Well, if you run in there and you're a female and you're 5'5" and you weigh 110 pounds, you're going to stop the fight? I don't know how. So what does she do when she goes in there? She's not going to hit him with the collapsible baton, where a beat patrolman would go in with his 22 to 26 inch nightstick, and he'd wrap the guy in the back with it, or if he had to, he'd tap the guy in the head, or hit him in the gut, or get him in the groin with an upsweep, or there was a million things you could do, hit him in the knee, you know, but it wouldn't go with the gun out. And you get him to break it up, you know. You could also, if you're holding it to hit like this, you got the butt sticking out here, you could hit the guy like that. But anyway, you know, they wreck the police and they turn the police into murderers. And they murder people. They shoot them 8 times with these 9mm, you know. They go boom, 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 boom. But they teach them not to stop shooting the guy until he's not moving. That, another word for that is no signs of life. Well, we used to double tap the guy. So what you would do is you go boom, boom with the revolver. You'd shoot 2 at him usually. And you waited. And you saw what the guy was doing. 9 times out of 10, the guy's gonna quit, okay? They don't always fall down, they stand up. Even though you gut shot them, they're still walking, but the fight's out of them. You know? They don't do that today. If he's still standing, he's gonna get another 2, and then another 2, and then another 2. And if he's on the ground moving his arms around, he's gonna get another 2. They're murdering people. I'm not wrong. They're murdering, but they don't do that in Israel. They don't do that in many other countries. America does that. It's crazy. They're picking the wrong police. It's stupid what they did. The women police are shooters. Then the men became shooters, and it's just... So the police are opposed to the civilian population in America. They're not there to protect them. They're there to get their money, their benefits, and everything else. And they just put anybody in jail for anything. They go around, write people tickets for 2 dark tinted windows, run them up a $900 bill on tickets. And they give them tickets and this and that, you know, and they put people in jail that shouldn't go to jail, and they scare people, and they push them around, and you know, they're idiots. And then the people put up with it. It's not supposed to be that way. All right, let's take a look at the chat, see if I get any questions. So there's so many things here that are triggers for Zechariah 12. It's amazing. Should be true. Well, we're getting harassments in here. I'll just block these people so we don't get it again. We'll get rid of the yes person. These people don't come in here to learn or share. They just come here to harass. That's all they want to do. All right, so I'll give you a crash course in Zechariah 12 so you understand. First thing you need to know before we do that is Jeremiah 30. I'll give it to you quick. Verse 5, for thus saith Jehovah, we have heard a voice of trembling and of fear and not of peace. This is the next war, which is in Zechariah 12. It's called Jacob's trouble also. It's in Jeremiah 30. And it's not about anybody coming and speaking peace and safety. It's trembling and fear. Okay, get that down. Ask you now and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins as a woman in travail? The travail is the actual birthing of the baby. The water break, the cervix is crown, is open, the baby is dilated, the baby is crowning, the head's coming out, or something like that, okay? And all faces are turned into paleness. Alas, for that day is great, so that there is none like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. That doesn't sound a lot like Gog and Magog to me. He shall be saved out of it. For it shall come to pass in that day. What do we read? Well, what do we see there? We see in Zechariah 14, it says the great day of the Lord. The women are raped, the houses are looted and pillaged, and half of Jerusalem goes into captivity. That means they become slaves or prisoners. For it shall come to pass in that day, it could mean they evacuate Jerusalem, but I think it means they become slaves or prisoners. For it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Jehovah of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck, and will burst thy bones, and strangers shall no more serve themselves of him. They shall serve Jehovah Elohim and David their king, from whom I will raise up unto them. Therefore fear thou not, O my servant Yaakov, saith Jehovah, neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land of the captivity, and Jacob shall return and be in rest. That's Israel. Jacob was the father of the 12 tribes. And be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. Now listen to this. For I am with thee, saith Jehovah, to save thee. Though I make a full end of all nations whither I have scattered thee, yet will I not make a full end of you. And it goes on how he will punish us. So now what you see, all the nations that he scattered the Israelites into has got to be over 100 nations. It's all of Europe, a lot of the Middle East, all of North, Central, and South America, and good pieces of Asia. It's extensive. So what you're seeing in Europe with Russia and NATO and all this is Jeremiah 30 verse 11 coming to pass. It's ready to pop. Putin got to make a move. The F-16s are going to start flying into Russia pretty soon. The missiles are already flying into Russia. Putin's out of rope. I'm going to be back in a minute. We'll do Zechariah 12, and I'll show you the tie-in. Now, the thing with Zechariah 12, when you see Zechariah 12, it appears that the bad ones have already been cut off, but I can't guarantee that. That's the Ezekiel 34, the bad shepherds, and other people that, take advantage of others in Israel and stuff like that. But I'm not going to do a big discourse on that. I'm just giving you the clue here as to where we're headed. It's a siege. I'm just going to read a couple of I'm not going to get into all of it. You see the two witnesses saving Israel there, burning up the enemies on the right hand and the left. It's in Zechariah 12. Okay, you see the Lord pour his spirit out on the occupants of Jerusalem and the house of David. And you see them see the sign of the Son of Man in the clouds. And then you get John 6:40, those that believe and see Yeshua have eternal life, which does not mean you can't die. But that's big Bible studies, and I have them all on my YouTube channel. They're all listed under live, not under videos, so see them under live. So the Zechariah 12, what I'm trying to impress is, it says in verse 2, "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege, both against Judah and Jerusalem." And that's the land we have now. A siege is a surrounding and then an attack. It also is an embargo type thing. China did a siege on Taiwan the other day with 30-something ships around it, plus aircraft. We're in siege from the north in Lebanon. They shoot missiles at us. We can't go to Lebanon. Goods can't go through Lebanon in or out. Gaza, the same thing. They shoot at us. You can't go in and out. Syria, we don't have any relationship with them. We can't go in. They can't go in. Goods don't travel through there. They shoot at us with missiles and rockets. Iraq shoots at us, but we don't have a common border with them. Jordan today we're getting along with, but that won't last. It's in the Bible. It'll stop. And Turkey we don't have a common border with, but they're in siege against us too. They don't want any goods going in and out and stuff like that. So basically, the siege is in place, but it's not yet complete. Okay? All right. In the siege, both against Judah and against Jerusalem, and in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. And it says people, all that burden themselves with it shall be. I live in Israel, so I can understand Hebrew too. I'm not the greatest, but I got the ability to understand a lot of the Bible words. Anyway, let's leave it at that. It shall be cut in pieces. The regular Israelis don't understand the Hebrew Bible, by the way, even though they speak Hebrew from birth. It's like you trying to read a Wycliffe Bible from 1500 or 1300. I think Tyndale's 1500. It'd be pretty hard. They'd be cut in pieces, and so all the people of the land be gathered together against it. Now, it doesn't say people; it says heathen, and the word for earth is ha'eretz, which can mean land or earth. So it's going to be a large amount of people. In that day, saith the Lord, I will smite every horse with astonishment. Now that word for horse is sus, probably means battle vehicles, and his rider with madness, and will open my eyes upon the house of Judah, and will smite every horse of the people with blindness. Well, when he says he opens his eyes on the house of Judah, those are the people that are here in Israel now. The 10 tribes aren't here now. When Yeshua says he appears in the sky, says he'll come in the clouds like lightning from the east to the west, and he'll show himself seated at the right hand of power, which is God the Father. And that, I believe, is when he opens his eyes, when he turns his face towards Israel. It may not be, it may just be a figure of speech, but I think it's maybe not that. It might be more literal than we think. Remember Psalm 110:1 says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit thou at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. Well, Yeshua's enemies to date are not his footstool, obviously. So he's still at God's right hand. That's why he says he comes in the clouds, seated on the right hand of power. He's still at God's right hand. Okay. And the judges, it says governor, it means the judges. God in Isaiah 1 says he's going to run Israel with the judges again. Moses and Aaron were the first judges. He says that the first. They were prophets and also judges. Judges are prophets. The two witnesses are prophets. The two witnesses will be the judges of Israel any day now, and they'll be running Israel. And that's going to be, well, I'll steal a word from Jackie Gleason. How sweet it is. And the judges of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem shall be my strength in Jehovah of hosts, Elohim. It doesn't say their God. They twist it up a little bit. It's not exactly that, but it's, they're given, their strength is in Jehovah. Not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. Now in verse 6, in that day I will make the judges of Judah like an earth of fire among the wood, and like a torch of fire in a sheaf, and they shall devour or burn up, it's better translation, all the people round about on the right hand and on the left, and Jerusalem shall remain still in her own place. They twist this up a little bit. They never do anything to Jerusalem, really. They don't conquer it. So it doesn't say that. It says remain still in her own place, even in Jerusalem. That's the Hebrew. So, who, like a torch of fire in a sheaf, and like an earth of fire among the wood? Well, who do you know who has fire coming out of their mouth but the two witnesses, the judges? They're prophets. Jehovah also shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. In that day shall Jehovah defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he that is feeble among them at that day shall be as David, as the house of David shall be as Elohim, as the angel of the Lord before them. So they're saying the feeble are going to be like David, who killed Goliath and a lion and a bear, because they're changed, because God, as you'll see in the next two verses, pours his spirit out on them, and then they see the sign of the Son of Man in the sky, and then John 6:40 kicks in, which promises them eternal life when that happens. And I'll read it to you. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the heathen that come against Jerusalem. Now, in verse 10, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications. Well, when he pours his spirit out on you, you're a believer, right? Then the next phrase, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced. They shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. In that day there shall be a great mourning in Jerusalem, and it says all the families of Israel are going to mourn for him. Well, people saw him when he was pierced, when they crucified him, and the soldier stuck a spear in his side, and out came blood and water, which was, many say, the beginning of the so-called churches. And it could be, but the blood would be, the wine, communion, the water, the Holy Spirit. But back to the subject. So, they were not mourning. The families in Israel were not running around mourning when they killed Yeshua. Let's get that. Okay, so that wasn't it. This is a future thing yet to be fulfilled. Okay? And so the Spirit is poured out on them. They're believers. Then they look upon the one whom they have pierced, which is Yeshua, And then you combine that with John 6:40 to get the completion, and it reads like this. And this is the will of him that sent me. This is the will of Father God Jehovah, that everyone which seeth the Son, they shall look upon the one whom they have pierced, the Son, right? And believeth on him, well, he just poured his Spirit out on them, so they're believers, may have everlasting life, and I will raise them up at the last day. So they get the everlasting life right then and there. The raising up at the last day is, tells you when the rapture is, but people don't like to believe it. In the previous verse, John 6:39, it says, and this is the Father's will, which hath sent me, that of all which he hath given me I should lose nothing, but should raise it up again at the last day. And he says it 2 more times in John 6:44 and 54. 4 times Yeshua says everybody gets raised up on the same day, and that's the last day. The last day means there's no more days. So it's after the millennium is over, after Satan is released and surrounds Jerusalem and New Jerusalem like, the sands of the sea. And then Father God Jehovah comes down from heaven and burns the whole universe up. And we meet them in the air because there's nothing left here to stand on. And we go up on the clouds of heaven to be with Jehovah and Yeshua in eternity in heaven, up the third heaven up there. That's when the raising up comes. Everybody goes up on the same day. Maybe they're a few minutes apart. But this pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, left behind rapture contradicts Yeshua's teachings in 4 distinct and clear places. So, as for me, I'll go with the Word of God. I won't go against the teachings of Yeshua. Okay, so I think we're all headed towards Zechariah 12 very quickly. If the soldiers in Israel do rebel, they're going to play wipeout in Gaza, and the nations are going to come to save Hamas and save the Palestinians and kill us. And they'll do that by laying siege to us to surround us initially, and then they would plan on coming in, but before it gets to the point where they invade us, God polishes them off using the judges, and he intervenes, and they're all dead. And you're going to have Jeremiah 30, verse 11. Now Jacob's trouble is Zechariah 12:10, not Gog and Magog. That's the great day of the Lord. And that's where we're headed. So the soldiers may not rebel, but the nations are rising up against us anyway. They're putting arrest warrants out for Netanyahu and Gallant. They might do voluntary sanctions against us. For instance, if the ICJ or the General Assembly of the United Nations passes, let's say the General Assembly of the UN passes sanctions for Israel, don't buy anything from Israel, don't sell anything from Israel until they end the Gaza war, they would need the Security Council to approve it to be mandatory enforcement, and it probably would never get through the Security Council. So the people could voluntarily decide to put sanctions, or they could just, these countries could just start saying, I'm putting sanctions on Israel, I'm doing it. They could do that. Turkey did it already, So we don't know what's coming, I'm not hearing talk of sanctions right now. It came up, but it doesn't seem to be getting pursued by anybody. So I don't know about that. But the arrest warrants is a reality already. They're going to have them issued very shortly. They're not going to be able to come into Israel and arrest them. But the European Union and several countries said they would honor those arrest warrants. So, it just keeps, they don't want to see Israel get raised up and serving God and being the head of the nations and them serving Jehovah. They don't want to see that. The nation born in a day is Israel born again. Like people in the church are born again. They serve God, a new creation in Christ Jesus. And that's what happens in Zechariah 12 when he pours the Spirit out on them and they see the Son of Man, Yeshua, and they get changed. They have eternal life. They're completely different. Read Jeremiah 31 to learn more about it. And if you go to my YouTube, I can't do every subject of prophecy on all these videos because it would be 18 hours long. But if you go to the YouTube channel in the live section, the titles across the top, you got videos and you got live. Go to live, that's where they are. And you'll find plenty of videos about this. And when you see sometimes it starts with the news, not all of them, but some of them, just fast forward through the news because it's old news. So that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you today. So everything's coming apart all at the same time. Asia Pacific, Europe, the Middle East, Iran's going to do something. The Middle East is coming apart anyway. So I'm wondering what's going to happen in Central and South America. They've been pretty sedate, and parts of Africa. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. So please pray for me and my wife. Pray for our peace, safety, protection, joy. Pray for our finances. Pray for better videos. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And pray we get better offerings. Out of the people that regularly watch the videos, I think at most 9% of the people give from those that regularly watch the videos. 90% don't give anything. They just come and watch all the time, and they look for the 9% that do support and keep me going, right? And they want to ride for free. See how that goes. Okay, so I send my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach, and I'm a little over 2 hours today. No more than a little, but okay. And I'm out, guys. I hope you got something out of this. Thanks.